So when I was asked to speak today about Faiz, I backtracked a little to see exactly how this event had come to take place and how and why I had been invited here. TED stands for Technology and Entertainment and Design, and I think technology has probably played the biggest part in me being here today. I'll just backtrack very quickly. I met somebody through a blog several years ago, a friend of mine who lived in Karachi, and she introduced me to another friend of hers who also lived in Karachi, who introduced me to another friend of hers. And this friend also based in Karachi organized an event in Lahore. It was an event, again, centered around technology. And I performed at that event, and so that was the entertainment part of it. And after performing at that event, somebody, again, from the technology sector asked me to perform here. And I know that in my introduction, they said that I work in the development sector, and it might seem like there's no connection between development and music, for example, and much less so with technology. But I think there is a very definite connection, and I think what Faiz's poetry does for me is to bring it all together for me and makes everything seem like it's not as chaotic as it might seem. I mean, I have several different interests. Development is one of them, and then there's music, and I've also worked in technology. And I think before I read Faiz Sahab's poetry, I couldn't connect the dots between all of them, but his poetry definitely has helped me do that. My work in development sometimes takes me to areas such as farms and rural areas, and a couple of days ago I was actually in Sindh at a few farms that we work with, that my project works with. We are supposed to be assisting them to help them recover from post-flood losses, for example. That's one area that my project works in. And when I was approaching that farm, I was completely unprepared to see what I saw. And what I saw was that there were miles and miles of crops, of various different kinds of crops that were completely destroyed by the floods that have taken place, record-breaking floods in Sindh this year. And all the people who used to live in the low-lying areas had been forced to come basically, they were just parked on the sides of the roads in little tents. And they've been living there for a while now. And it occurred to me that there's one song of Faiz Sahab's that I composed and that I sang. And before I saw this, before the floods happened this year and last year, I had taken that poem to be a very symbolic sort of a poem where I could take lessons from it and apply it to my life and to all the problems that we face and how to get over them. But when you look at these literal issues that are literally staring you in the face, when you see the crops that are lying there completely destroyed and you know that you don't know what's going to happen to them, they're standing knee-deep in water, and then there's people living basically out of not even suitcases. They're just existing there in makeshift tents. And then you go back and revisit some of the poems that Faiz Sahab wrote several years ago, several decades ago, and you see that he was not just talking symbolically. It was all very literal. You can interpret it if you want, and you can apply it to your own life, but what he was talking about was very literal. It stares you in the face. And the first song that I'll sing is actually about that, and I thought I'd make that my first song because of what I just saw a couple of days ago. This song actually doesn't just talk about optimism. It talks about being optimistic and trying and failing and trying yet again, knowing that you're going to fail. It's one thing to try when you have hope of succeeding, but when you know you're going to fail and you still try with that knowledge, it takes a certain different kind of optimism for that. This song is called Ye Fasal Umeedon Ki, and I'd like to invite Yasir Qureshi, who's just moved to Lahore from Karachi. He plays the darbuka. He'll be providing the percussion. all the things I used to be interested in before I started reading Faiz Sahab's poetry in more detail. So before I was working in development, I've been working in development for about the past 10 years or so. In the middle of all of this, I took a year off, and I went to Australia to pursue a degree, a master's degree in development. And while I was there, it was actually then when I was away from my country for some reason that I started reading Faiz in greater detail. Before that, I just heard his songs or just read him in passing. But when you're away from home, everything becomes more dramatic, and you start paying more attention to what's going on back at home, and then you search for relevance, for a connection to your homeland. And so my father had given me a copy of Faiz Sahab's poetry before I'd left, and I started reading it. And I think 6 months into my degree, I realized that I was not actually doing what I wanted to do, and I was focusing on something else entirely. And this was not what I wanted to be doing. I didn't want to be studying anymore. I wanted to go back and work, and I wanted to make music, and I wanted to share Faiz's poetry because I wanted other people to feel as passionately about his poetry as I did. And there was one poem in particular, which is the next one I will be singing, that appealed to me. And I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that Faiz was very entrepreneurial in his spirit. I don't think people give him enough credit for that. I think they try to find a lot of optimism and hope and beauty in his poetry, for example. But he's actually, he should be the patron poet of all entrepreneurs. This poem in particular is called Tum Apni Karni Kar Guzro, and it basically says that you shouldn't worry about the consequences, and you shouldn't be scared of what you feel you should be doing, or scared of a failure, and that you should be able to rise above failure and do what you want and just hope that it will lead you to success. And that's basically what my understanding of entrepreneurship is. So it really appealed to me, and at that time I took stock of what I was doing, and I realized I needed to come back home. So that's what I did. So I left my degree and I came back home, and I took a year off from development as I taught music at a school, and Faiz Sahab's poetry was among the things that I taught. And this was to students who were 12 years to 16, 17, 18 years old. And these students helped me see where I was and my surroundings. There were changing surroundings at that time. Pakistan's security situation was deteriorating in exactly those years. This was 2007, 2008. And this was actually the time when I first saw what was happening to my country. And I think a lot of us also, this is the time when we started thinking about the fact that we had grown up to be that generation that needs to get things done, and we can't rely on our elders anymore. And at that time, in that particular age also, when I was teaching my students music and poetry through music, I saw the world through their eyes and saw how disenchanted and disempowered they felt and how they responded to Faiz's poetry. And this poem in particular, I think, appealed to them. So I'll just sing this song. It's called Tum Apni Karni Kar Guzro.
जो कुछ पाया खो जाए।
So this is how I've connected the dots and made sense of how all the things that I'm interested in do come together, and how poetry is relevant, at least for me. I'm not sure if it works for everyone. But as music and poetry go, I don't think I'm very much mistaken in assuming that it adds meaning to most people's lives and helps them to connect the dots. And I think in keeping with TED's themes of connecting technology and entertainment and design, just trying to find the commonalities between apparently disparate things. I think this is basically what Faiz Sahab's poetry also does for me. Thank you.